Welcome to Dale's Dominion podcast, where we discuss Virginia real estate and beyond. Here's your host, Dale Shoop.
Welcome to Dale's Dominion, Virginia real estate and beyond, where we dive deep into the world of real estate and title insurance. And if we have time, we might talk about money and motivation, cars and coffee, or maybe burgers and bourbon. I'm your host, Dale Shoop. Today, we get to speak with Heather Fox. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Glad to have you. So you've written a book too. It's called Whisper, and it's about a dramatic rescue involving your horse. So tell us a little bit about that.
So I have been a horse lover ever since I can remember. There's few people who are on the fence about horses. That you're either all in and you can't get enough, or well, they're pretty, but I'll admire them from afar. But I have always been mad about horses, and I have spent my whole life ever since I was. In fact, when I was a kid, I grew up on a farm, and I used we had to raise dairy heifers and things like that. And I saved all of my money from the time I was like 7 years old to buy my first horse when I was 9. My whole life has sort of been tied up with that. And that's the thing that gives me the most joy and the most stress relief and therapy. I mean, there's a reason why horses are used for PTSD soldiers. And if you love them, there's just something about them that is just soothing to the soul and fabulous. But Whisper is a horse that I got I guess in 2005, and I bought him. It's kind of silly. I had an Arabian that my uncle had gotten me turned on to, and I decided that I just loved the Arabians and I wanted another Arabian. But I had been on horses my whole life, and so I could pretty much ride anything. And my uncle, there's not very many Arabians down here except for very, very, very expensive, registered. But he lives up in Delaware, and there used to be a whole lot more Arabians up there. And so I told him that I wanted a new Arabian because Pauline, my old one, was kind of in bad shape, and I needed a replacement. And the only requirement I had was that it be white. They're called gray. They're called gray in terms of actual horses. But he said, Heather, you cannot buy a horse based on color. That's ridiculous. It's got to be, and I said, yes, I know, but I just always wanted my first horse was a white horse, and I wanted another white horse. So he found me this white horse, or one of his friends went to an auction and got this horse for me. So I went up to Delaware to see it, and he said, well, it's supposed to be 7 years old. And I don't actually know anything at all about him. The horse was in bad shape. He was really thin, and he was just rough. But he said, if you don't want him, there's no skin off my back. I'll just take him back to the auction. Well, I learned that the auction was New Holland, and New Holland is where they take horses to be slaughtered and ship them up to Canada. So I had spent about half an hour with the horse, and I got on him and I rode him around a little bit. I mean, he was definitely kind of in rough shape, and I mostly felt sorry for him more than anything else. And he didn't know anything about him. He said, he was very honest, and he said, I know absolutely nothing about him besides what the vet check papers say there. They said he was 7 years old. So I was getting ready to take the saddle and everything off of him, and I was sort of standing in front of him, and I was debating because he wasn't really what I was in the market for exactly. And he put his head on my shoulder, literally rested his head on my shoulder as we're talking about what's going to happen to him. And the other man had just said, well, if you don't want him, that's completely fine. I'll just take him back to the auction. And it was almost like the horse knew what that meant. And he put his head on my shoulder, and he just whinnied, nickered very, very softly in my ear. And it was almost like he was whispering into my ear, if you'll just take me and save me, then I will spend the rest of my life taking care of you and being loyal to you, as a thank you for saving me. And I know that sounds kind of crazy, but that's what I felt at the time. It really seemed like that was what he was telling me. And so I took the horse and I brought the horse home. And I first took him to my vet, and you can tell a horse's age sort of, kind of, by their teeth. The older they are, the harder it is to tell how old they are. But a vet can age them pretty closely by their teeth up until they're, in their early teens maybe. After that, it gets a little more difficult because the amount of wear and things like that have a lot to do with the soils and how much sand they're eating with their grass, and how much how quickly what they're eating wears their teeth and how it grinds them down and things like that. in Delaware, it's very, very sandy, and their teeth they get sand in their mouth while they're grazing, and then that kind of wears their teeth down faster than it does here. Here we got nothing but red Virginia clay, so they don't really get much of that in there. But anyway, so I took him to my vet down here, and my vet said, well, yeah, he's not 7. He's probably early 20s.
Oh, wow.
So I was crushed, but he said, no, he looks terrible because he's so skinny, but he looks to be pretty structurally sound, actually. And Arabians have excellent longevity. They live much longer than most other breeds. So he said, even though he's in his early 20s, you could probably get at least another decade out of him, just take care of him, get him back in shape and stuff. So I crossed my fingers and said, I hope I can get 10 more years out of him.
Yeah.
Well, when he started getting back into shape again and I got some meat on him and stuff, he was a handful. And it took me probably almost a solid decade to get him, just calmed down and under control. But over that decade, I just spent so much time working with him and bonding with him. And we went through a bunch of different experiences. And it turned out that he was really, really an excellent trail horse. Very, very sure-footed and would go anywhere and do anything. I could finally get the saddle on him. So we had spent, just a lot of time together, bonding together. And although he was a handful, you could tell that he loved me. And he had so much more personality than your average horse. So anyway, long story short, a girlfriend of mine and her husband went to Camp Todd, which is there's a old camping and parking area there. And then there's trails that go up to the top of the mountain. And it's sort of like right on the West Virginia line. Well, we hadn't been on these trails in a really, really long time. And it was March. And we saddled up, and we were about halfway up the mountain, and we encountered some mountain bikers who were coming down the mountain. And one of them had a torn up knee and some other things where he said that he had wrecked up there. He said they suggested that we not go any farther because they said the trail up there is pretty narrow. It's really steep. There's all kinds of ice, and it's kind of treacherous, and there are some trees and things that are down. Oh, wow. So we took that advice and ignored it, which we shouldn't have done in hindsight, but it does tend to be that people do not realize how adaptable and flexible and things horses actually are, and they really can do a lot of things that people don't think they can do. So anyway, we went on up the mountain, and we got, 3/4 of the way up there, and the trail got really, really narrow. Only one horse width wide, and it dropped straight off down one side, and it was straight up the hill on the other side. So there was no going around anything. Right. And a huge tree had fallen across the trail, and we could not get over the tree. So we had to turn around and go back. And because you just couldn't go around the tree at all because it was so steep. And a lot of the whole downside of the hill was nothing but rocks and fallen trees and stumps. And so we all got off of our horses because they had to turn around in like a 2-foot wide space, which for a 6-foot long horse is difficult. So we all got off of our horses because nobody wanted to be on the horse if the horse slipped or fell or whatever. So we got off the horses and gave them their head and let them get themselves turned around. So I had been in the front. So when we turned around, I was in the back. Yeah. And the 2 horses in front of me, one of them kind of got spooked and pushed past the other one. Ooh. And when it did that, it pushed that one off the ledge. Ooh. And that horse fell maybe 10, 12 feet and got stopped on a tree trunk that was sticking up, which was good in a way because it was a little bit of a level area though. So the horse wasn't hurt, but he couldn't get back up off that ledge very quickly. Well, the ruckus spooked my horse, and he jumped, and the side of the bank gave way, and he tumbled head over heels several times, and then he's going straight down. He's got his legs completely forward, like he's skiing, snow plowing, trying to stop himself. And he finally did get himself stopped, and I went scrambling down to him, and I got to him. But once I got down there, it was pretty clear that it was going to be really, really hard to get back up because there were so many trees and rocks and things. We couldn't even take a step without, an encumbrance. So I started trying to work my way back up, and my friend said, go a little bit further down because there's not as many tree trunks and rocks a little bit further down. So I went a little bit further down, and I actually got within maybe 15 or 20 feet of the trail again. But the hillside was so steep that my horse literally went straight over backwards. And I could feel him starting to tip over backwards.
Oh my.
This is how he was so dedicated that he was going straight up a trail that was so steep that he literally fell over backwards, trying to get up for me. And I could feel when he was starting to go, and I pulled down with everything I had on his reins to try to keep his head from, completely flipping over. And obviously I couldn't hold him, and it just ripped those things through my reins, and he literally fell over backwards, and he somersaulted multiple times, hitting tree trunks and rocks, and he finally did come to a stop, and I was sure he had to be, seriously injured. Yeah. And I am just praying and crying and, trying to get down to him. It was not easy to get down to him because the side of the slope where we fell off was in the shade, and so it was all snowy and slick anyway. And so he finally got himself stopped, and he didn't want to move again because every time he tried to move, he would fall. And it was awful because I couldn't just stay there. We had to get off of there. But forcing him to move kept making him fall. And he fell and rolled probably at least 5 times. And I just couldn't believe that he was even still alive. So in the end, I was not able to get back up at all. My friends couldn't find me because it was kind of like a bowl. And every time they would come down, they would follow my voice. But once they would kind of get down into that bowl, it would just sort of echo all over the mountain, and they couldn't tell where I was.
Oh, no.
So they, in the end, rode out to get help, and I determined that I could not go back up. There was just no way I was going to be able to go up. So all of my years of hiking and training and all that stuff in the outdoors has always taught me, find water and follow the water down. And that will always get you to a way out eventually. So there was a creek bed there, and I got into the creek bed, and we started going down the creek bed. And we got about half a mile maybe. And by this time, it sounds crazy, but every 10 feet would take me 20 to 30 minutes because I had to get my little saw out and assemble it and saw through some stuff in order to move some things. Wow. And then, we would take 3 or 4 more steps, and then I'd have to, repeat the whole process. And that's how horrible that whole side of the mountain was. Wow. So when we got into the creek, we got a ways down the creek, and then the bank started to get pretty high on both sides, and there was a tree that had fallen across the creek. So I was trying to get him to climb over the tree, and this horse was trying to climb over the tree for me. Even though he's already fallen all these times and he's beaten himself bloody, he's loosened teeth because they smacked into rocks and things.
Oh, gosh.
And he is trying to crawl over this tree branch for me, or tree, not a branch, the whole tree. And he got himself on top of it, but then he kind of got like high centered, and he couldn't get off of it. So he's rocking back and forth on his belly, and he had to go forward. So I pushed, and I got him enough forward that he did get over the tree. Unfortunately, he landed in the creek and rolled again, and somehow or another got his back legs wedged under a rock, and he could not get up. Wow. He didn't seem to have broken legs, but they were stuck, and he could not get up. And his head is in the water.
Oh, no.
So, and it's March. It's cold.
It's cold. Yeah.
So I am in the water with him, holding his head up. And a horse's head is heavy after a couple of minutes, So I sat there on that rock, holding my horse's head, and I had that was the moment that was like, there's nothing I can do. This is completely out of my power. My horse is going to die, and there is no one for miles and miles and miles. And there was such a remote area that there was no cell phone service at all. There was not even satellite phones or anything worked. So I sat on that rock and I prayed. And I just said, God, I cannot fix this. And he's going to die if he can't get up. And I don't know what to do. Please save my horse. Yeah. I know you can do it. So it sounds nuts, but it was like the hand of God came straight out of heaven and picked that horse up, pulled him out from under the rock, and 5 seconds later, without me doing anything, he was standing on his feet.
Wow.
And I mean, it's hard to explain. I have tried in the book. The meaningfulness of that, and just, I mean, it was really, it was a miracle. There was just nothing else that I could possibly say about that. And there were so many other things that happened that day, because I have a condition where when my body gets extremely stressed and dehydrated, the potassium leaves my muscles and it gets kind of locked into my bloodstream, and it gets taken out of my muscles, and then my muscles seize. And I had a really, really bad experience in Maryland, I don't know, 5 or 6 years before that, where I was actually riding with some friends, and I had been bucked off a horse the day before. So I was stiff and I was sore, and I hadn't slept that night, the night before, and I was not in very good shape. And I ended up having this muscle seizure that it started with, just sort of a tenseness, and that just kept on getting tighter and tighter and tighter, and I couldn't stop it. And it took over my legs, and it kind of crept up my body. It locked my jaw. And then, of course, I was upset. So then I couldn't breathe through my nose because my nose got stuffed up, and I had to be medevaced in a helicopter to the Maryland Trauma Center.
Oh my gosh.
So that's how I discovered about this issue. And I had learned that I could control it by taking potassium chloride, fast release capsules that I carried in a medical kit.
Okay.
And I also carried a cartridge filter for drinking water out of creeks or whatever, if you in a pinch, in order to clear the water. So I carried these sort of things in my saddlebags, and when the horse rolled and hit the stones and the tree trunks and all that stuff so many times, everything in my saddlebags was just crushed and ruined.
Sure.
So after I got him out of the creek, by this time it's getting dark, and we're both wet and cold. Hadn't had any food, and I can feel these muscle seizures coming on.
Oh, no.
If the muscle seizures get to your heart, it can literally kill you. It always starts in my legs, and I could feel them coming on in my legs. So I said, okay, I've got to get a potassium pill out of my saddlebag and get that in right away. So I go digging into my saddlebag, and my pill capsule is completely crushed, and it's gone.
Oh, no.
So I take the saddlebags off, and I go rummaging through them, and I find one unbroken potassium capsule in the bottom of the bag.
Okay.
So, and my filter cartridge was not dead or had not been broken. So I filtered some water out of the creek that we had just gotten ourselves out of.
Right.
And took that potassium pill, and I was able to stave off the worst of that, the muscle seizures.
Yeah.
I also found in there that I actually had some foot warm, the little air activated foot warmer things.
Yeah.
So, and I had learned from a previous experience of falling into my horse fell through the ice and falling into a creek in January up at Slate Lick. I learned that those things don't work once they get wet.
Oh, no. No.
My feet and everything are completely wet. So I had a pair of large gloves in the bag. So I actually took my socks and my wet socks and my boots off, and I stuck the little pads directly on my feet, and then I put my gloves on top of them like shoes. And that actually initiated enough heat that I got my legs and stuff warm. But anyway, several other things, which I won't give you all the details that are in the book. Which you can buy on Amazon or Kindle, or it's available on e-reader and things like that too. Any bookstores, you can have them order it. And
the name of the book is Whisper?
It's just called Whisper. Yep, that's from my horse. So the rest of the story is in there. But that experience showed me that, I guess it taught me the life lesson that's kind of a big deal for me, because I am I'm a very driven, motivated person. I'm kind of an overachiever. That can be good, but it also is bad in that I have a tendency to feel like I need to be in control. I have to control things. I have to be the one, to make things right or to fix things or whatever. And there are times when you have got to accept that things are out of your control, and worrying and stressing about something that you actually can't do anything about is hard on you. I mean, the amount of stress that people walk around with and carry around with, it translates into your health and, your overall well-being so much more than a lot of people actually realize. And I'm not, the lesson is not, don't care about things and don't do anything. The lesson is you should live your life trying to do the best that you can do in every situation. And when you have control, you do the things that you should do, that are within your control. But there is no point in worrying and stressing and being upset about things that you can't actually change. Focus on the things that you can change. And for me, faith is really, really important to me. And for me, that whole life experience of coming to the conclusion that, okay, I'm beyond my means. There's nothing I can do. It's out of my control. So I have learned to try to give those things to God, let him carry those things and let him work it out. And it always works out best when I don't try to control it and I give it to him. So that one particular experience showed me sometimes God has to take everything away from you in order to get you to see that it's not you. You have to rely on him, and you have to give it to him and let him do it. And that lesson has made a really, really big impact on everything that I do in my whole life now, because you have to learn what you can and can't control. And when you can't control, give it to him and trust that it's going to work out. And it does. And that whole experience really brought home to me, that faith it's critical to your whole life and your happiness in general and your fulfillment and your contentment and everything. And if you're trying to run everything, it's just not going to work right. And just being able to let that stress go. I mean, I just feel like there is this, no matter what is going on and how stressful things are, it's just like this huge weight is off of my shoulders. And that's what I would like for people to be able to experience. And that's why I wrote that book. The book is about the horse and the experience, but it also is, a little bit about my own personal internal lessons and how, I think that would help a lot of people. And, you don't have to be a horse lover to appreciate the book. And I have a somewhat dry sense of humor. So there's stuff in there that will definitely make you chuckle. You'll go through the whole gamut of emotions. Everybody, my pastor read it. He said, I'm so embarrassed because I was in the coffee shop crying in public. And, and he's like, and then 5 minutes later, I'm laughing. And people think that, we're looking at me thinking, what in the world is going on with this guy? But it's the full gamut.
Okay. Well, yeah.
And it's kind of cool for people who are local because, it talks about local things and the search and rescue teams, the Deerfield Valley Fire Department, there's a lot of stuff. And so the geographical references and things are interested, to people who know them.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's
You're welcome.
Really solid advice from a powerful lesson that you learned. Sounds like maybe the hard way, which is how a lot of us do.
That tends to be the way.
And so thank you. I want to acknowledge you, your accomplishments and contributions, both in the real estate industry and local community are noteworthy, and your dedication to transparency and education and resilience. I hope to talk again soon.
All right. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you.